I'm Colonel R.G. Cole, Lieutenant Colonel R.G. Cole, 3rd Battalion, 502nd Parachute Infantry, 101st Airborne Division.
The US attack on the strategically important town of Carentan is a story well told. Airborne infantry conducting a series of obstacle crossings over bridges along an exposed, raised causeway, all the while under intense fire from the elite German Fallschirmjäger. In this video, we bring a hero to life, retracing his actions that day. But importantly, we will explore the German perspective, the defenders, the Lions of Carentan.
So we're here at Dead Man's Corner just outside Carentan, and today's video is all about the Allied attack into Carentan. So it's all about the 101st Airborne Division, Lieutenant Colonel Cole and Purple Heart Lane, as you'd expect. But we're actually going to look at this through a slightly different lens, and that's through the defenders' perspective, so the 6th Fallschirmjägerregiment, so we can see exactly why there were so many casualties from the Allies' perspective. So follow me and we'll go take a look now.
If you watch these videos, you know that we start off looking at the ground. And at Carentan, the ground is king. The town was virtually an island following the deliberate flooding of the surrounding countryside by the Germans. This raised causeway the route into town. Here you can see Carentan, the strategic crossroad town. To the north is Saint-Côme-du-Mont, linked via this causeway. So why Carentan? Well, Carentan links the Utah and Omaha beaches, forming a continuous Allied breachhead. Carentan had to be retained by the Germans, and amongst the other units, the 6th Fallschirmjägerregiment would have to play a vital role. Friedrich von der Heydter was the commander of the 6th Fallschirmjägerregiment. The unit consisted of 3 battalions, each commanded by Emil Preichat, Rolf Major, and Horst Trebs. It was augmented by an engineer company, an anti-tank company, and a heavy mortar company. The officers and senior NCOs were experienced, many of them having served in Italy, North Africa, and in Crete. They were well trained and they were incredibly well motivated. Morale was very high, but like any unit, they also had their weaknesses. For example, as a light role unit, they lacked mechanization and transportation. Their strength was 3,357 officers and soldiers complete. And while I hinted at their command experience, the soldiers themselves averaged only 17.5 years old. Remarkably, the whole regiment was jumps trained, so this constituted 6 jumps during the daytime and 3 jumps at night. The regiment lacked ammunition and the ability to transport it, and importantly, the regiment was dispersed on June the 6th, 1944. So let's look at the battalions more broadly. So each battalion had 3 rifle companies and 1 heavy company. Each rifle company had 18 light machine guns and 3 medium mortars. Each heavy company had 12 medium machine guns and 4 heavy mortars, a considerable amount of firepower. The Allied accounts refer to the intense indirect fire from the Germans, but allocated to the defence was 4 88mm PaK-43s, more of a direct fire weapon system, and they had 4 105mm mountain howitzers. They also had 4 75mm light infantry guns, all of which lacked ammunition. So for example, the howitzers had only 70 rounds per gun. For context, that equates to about 30 minutes of sustained fire at rate 2. As an artilleryman, I can tell you that this ammunition would have been used very quickly. The balance of their indirect fire would have come from the mortars. However, many of those were lost in the withdrawal from Saint-Côme-du-Mont. Therefore, we should question the veracity of the claims about the intensity of the Germans' indirect fire capability. So in summary, the 6th Fallschirmjägerregiment were well trained and they were very well motivated and they had lots of firepower. But they had a serious lack of ammunition and they had virtually no mechanized ability. They were also very dispersed. The regiment was forced to withdraw from Saint-Côme-du-Mont after heavy fighting, which resulted in the 1st Battalion being virtually wiped out or taken prisoner. The 2nd Battalion would defend the eastern approach from Omaha Beach and its 2 main routes. The 3rd Battalion would defend the western approach, and this is the area that we are going to look at. They believed the Allies would hammer the forward position with massed artillery, and so they positioned their forces further back, but they did observe the causeway. To the southeast was the 635 Ost Battalion, some of them seen here having surrendered at Utah Beach. To the southwest, the 3rd Battalion of the 1058 Panzer Grenadier Regiment, and in reserve we can see the 439 Ost Battalion and the Heavy Mortar Company. Perhaps not the ferocious defence you might associate with Carentan. So that's enough of the context. Let's look at the causeway itself and the area of our story. This flooded landscape with the raised road into the town. Now let's look at the ground in detail with the flooding present. There were 4 bridges on the causeway. The 2nd had been destroyed and the 4th was blocked with obstacles. The road itself was relatively bare. There were very few trees along the road. And try to imagine that when you see the footage I'm going to show you. So let's go on the ground to the 1st bridge. Now it's always good to be back in Normandy, and this is the 1st bridge along the route, and it's actually the original bridge. It's the only one which is original actually, the other ones have been replaced. Now, this video focuses on the defenders, but we need to talk about the attackers too. So Lieutenant Colonel Robert G. Cole was the commander of the 3rd Battalion, 502nd Parachute Infantry Regiment. He was ordered to assault across the causeway, to bypass the town of Carentan, and to secure the area near Alary. So actually, getting down this causeway and over the 4 bridges and breaking into the outskirts of town was just his preliminary moves. His objective was actually 1.5 kilometers or so beyond the bridges. I'm just trying to see if there is any damage on the bridge, but it actually looks to be in good shape. Ordinarily, you'd probably find lots of spang and damage on structures like this. Now, the other bridges, as I said, have been replaced, but they would have been constructed almost exactly like this one. Now, when you look at this footage, try to imagine there being far less trees and shrubs. So most people had fireplaces, obviously, back then, and wood was the fuel, and it was a much needed commodity. So the landscape was almost bare in 1944, and I'll try and overlay a picture to sort of prove that point. And so Lieutenant Colonel Cole and his men crossed the 1st bridge without too many issues, really. They came under some harassing indirect fire, but the main concentration would be reserved for the 2nd bridge, which had been destroyed. So let's go and take a look at the 2nd bridge now. So now approaching bridge number 2 and the location of the original bridge which used to be here. So the bridge was blown by the German Pioneer Battalion 191 to create a water crossing obstacle. Now let's just walk down this track and take a look from the riverbank. What we're talking about blowing bridges, actually, interestingly, the authority to fire the bridge, not blow the bridge, is retained by the commander. When you're referring to destroying bridges and demolitions, we always say to fire the bridge. However, the bridge in this case was fired when a recce force from the US was seen approaching the bridge. So it was actually probably blown up too early. I think it was blown up on the 8th of June. And so we can already see this much wider stretch of water. This is the Douve River. And the engineers were supposed to have prepared a temporary bridge to allow Colonel Cole and his men to cross, but they had not been able to do so because of all the artillery and the mortar fire which was aimed at this obstacle. And I have to say, an opposed obstacle crossing is a dream for an artilleryman. You have the enemy concentrated in a relatively small area, they're canalized, and you have the definite grid of the bridge you want to engage. The 3rd Battalion under Colonel Cole managed to make a rudimentary sort of footbridge using wooden planks and rope, but this restricted them to 1 man crossing at a time. And so right here, there was a lot of suffering, both psychologically as well as physically. Let's now go to bridge number 4, which was blocked by an obstacle which stopped the attack. I'm now stood on bridge number 4, the final bridge, a much smaller crossing, but a bridge was still required. And this is an original photo showing the Belgian gate, which has now been moved aside, but it was blocking the bridge. So I'm actually going to walk away from the objective. I'm now going to walk from bridge 4 towards the direction we've already come from, so away from Carentan. The Germans are now behind us. Another incident which occurred right here was a strafing run by 2 German planes, which resulted in 30 or so casualties, I believe it was, from I Company. And that happened right here on this route. The planes were strafing up and down the road while the 3rd Battalion was formed up on these banks because of the stoppage up ahead. And what I want to try and get across to you is just how open this causeway was. So try to imagine, next to no trees here, almost being bare. And it's obviously raised. And I want to try and show you how raised this causeway is. So I'm just trying to find an exit off this road. Now, as many of you will know, this causeway earned the moniker Purple Heart Lane due to the amount of casualties sustained here. This is it. So I'm now going to break track and look in this field as it allows me to look across to the German positions. In that hedge over there is where the first line of German defences were. I'm trying to show you the elevation of the road here. Right across this field, which was flooded, was the German position. Looking back, this would look almost like a shooting range with the Allies running from left to right along this raised ground. It's absolutely terrible. So let's head back towards bridge number 4. And remember, it had that Belgian gate on the bridge blocking the route.
So we're just coming up to the 4th bridge now, and the traffic that they would have had to contend with in 1944 is very much different to the traffic I'm having to contend with today. But this is the 4th bridge, and you can see it's not a small obstacle by any stretch. It's not something they could wade over or jump across. They had to use the bridge, and this is the final bridge that they crossed before they made it into the open and assaulted the German position. As soon as they came around this corner from the bridge, they would see the farm building, which was a strong point, and an elevated piece of ground right in front of me now, which is where the Germans were dug in.
I had this picture to convey the lack of trees and the vegetation which I was speaking about. And we are in this location here in the bottom left, having just crossed bridge number 4. And here are all the known German positions. So this flat area, which is bare, was essentially the kill zone. So why don't we go and take a look at the enemy positions?
So that is what the Allies had to do. Now let's look at the Germans. So the Germans would naturally use this obstacle as a bit of a barrier. They could form up their positions right here. And so if you look at this raised, what we call a bund line, built up natural defence, that would have been perfect for the Germans to line up alongside. Now just look at this. This raised piece of terrain here would have been perfect for the Germans to be behind. And their field of fire, remember these trees wouldn't necessarily have been here, is across the river onto the causeway, which you can see just beyond this hedge line. So from a defensive position, this is absolutely perfect. 4 obstacles to cross just to get to your objective. Okay, let's see where else the Germans were. We're now walking towards the farm, which was really the only building around here back in 1944. Of course, it's much more built up now. That's called Ingu Farm, as we've already said. And the building was occupied. It would have had weapon systems placed in the windows, covering this advance, and Lieutenant Colonel Cole, left with no other option, ordered his men to fix bayonets and assault the farm. And you can see the farm right there in front of me. Now, interestingly, to the right of the farm, just across the road, you can see another small orchard or a line of trees, and this is also elevated. This was a defensive position for the Fallschirmjäger, and they were defending that position ferociously. Just here now, you can see it in shot. And so this approach route that Lieutenant Colonel Cole was using would have been covered by fire. He would have been running into fire, which is just amazing to think of, really. They must have been very desperate, and he must have known that his men were quite close to being defeated, given all the casualties they'd sustained getting to this position. So as I said, as well as the farm building, which we can see just here, to the right of that building is an elevated piece of land right there, and exactly as I said before, by the river there would have been a defensive position covering the approach route to the farm. The Germans had really prepared well here. We're now going to cross the road to that elevated natural defence which we spoke about. Now this hedgerow here is reminiscent of a lot of the bocage that you see slightly further south from here, and places like St. Lo. Quite a thick hedgerow there, and the Germans would have been behind this hedgerow on the elevated terrain, looking down towards the fourth bridge. That fourth bridge location is right in the centre of the screen now, at the traffic circle if you're American, or roundabout if you're British. And so I've just gone inside the hedge line basically to show you the elevated nature of this position. So if I look through here, you can see that I'm a good 5-6 foot higher than the road leading to the farm. And so this is at the rear of the German position on that elevated bank. You can see if I walk down just how elevated it is. So this is the water obstacle I was talking about at the rear of the German position. So as I said, obstacles work both ways, exactly the same as smoke and tracer fire works both ways. It's a double-edged weapon. If they have this water obstacle at their back, it's incredibly difficult for them to withdraw, but you can just see how elevated this bank is. So they would have occupied this bank facing the Americans who were coming down this main road just to my right here. And again, another view of that bank that the Germans would have occupied right along that tree line, and they would have faced in the direction that car's coming from. All of this open terrain they could have raked with their small arms fire and machine gun fire. And of course we've got the strong point on the right here, which is Ingu Farm, just behind these trees. So it's actually a really strong defensive position. So not only did the Germans canalize the Americans on the causeway approaching the roundabout, the fourth bridge, the final bridge, they also created a killing area in front of this position. All of this ground the Americans would have had to cross in order to get to that farm.
During the morning, early morning hours, about 4 o'clock, we were able to infiltrate men across the bridge there one at a time at about 1 minute intervals. And we got them, the majority of the battalion, pretty well scattered up along the road here and on the field on the other side of the road. Fortunately, I had the artillery liaison officer from the 337th right by my side, and he was able to set his radio up and contact the artillery, and we had artillery fire continuously all over this area here. and back along there and up the road towards Carentan. This went on for about 45 minutes. And then I called for smoke to be laid all over the area, especially down in this area here. And when it was thick enough, I issued the order for our bayonet charge.
All right, we're now approaching Ingu Farm. And as I round this corner, so of course this is someone's house, so I don't want to intrude too much, but this was the objective of the bayonet charge. I'm going to see if you can see any damage to this building. I think if you look closely enough at that side of the farm over there, you can actually see some bullet strike marks, signs of fighting that took place here. Lieutenant Colonel Cole set up his command post here, but he also had to clear this position. So after they'd raced across that open ground to get into this location, they actually fought almost hand to hand, room to room, clearing this building. An inspirational act of leadership to get his men out of a very, very precarious position.
As promised at the start, I want to show you how I try to bring to life the footage of Lieutenant Colonel Robert Cole. And if you follow the channel, you'll know that I love then and now images, and I think the next step is then and now moving footage. I can imagine him standing here and suddenly he looks a lot larger than life. He looks like an inspiring figure, and he's definitely someone that I would follow. If you enjoy the then and now footage, please let me know in the comments and I'll try and do some more when I go on my travels. So Lieutenant Colonel Robert Cole was awarded the Medal of Honor for leading his men to clear this position in a famous bayonet charge. But sadly, he was killed only months later near Eindhoven. I'm going to be covering that event in a future video.
At 5:15, we were fired upon and had to hit the ditch just where, or hit any cover we could get. We stayed there, and I thought the only solution was either to withdraw back to bridge and run the chance of getting everybody killed withdrawing, to attack this position, or just lie in the ditches and be sniped at that. So I called for artillery fire, which I received, and then issued order for bayonet charge.
I hope you enjoyed this video. This is the last in my Normandy series, and I've absolutely loved making them. If you enjoyed the video too, then why not leave me a like and a comment, because it helps the channel to grow. Until next time.